Hey guys, so I'm recording this video, for supporting you in reading through the first chapter of the book. Some may find it daunting to read through all those texts, right? So let's go page by. I won't read each and every word, but I just skim through and give you some prompts, okay, and give you some prompts to kind of ponder upon. So you can ponder upon those sentences, okay. So as you can see, this chapter starts with a very beautiful quote. In mathematics, I can report no deficiency, except it be that men do not sufficiently understand the excellent use of the pure mathematics, by Francis Bacon, right? And then for the first few pages, it goes on to describe all visionaries, very famous people like Saint Augustine or Blaise Pascal, who were great in their own lives, but they were speaking against pursuing mathematics, right? So he gives many famous people: Saint Augustine, Blaise Pascal, and then the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. Okay. So they are speaking against pursuing mathematics, but it goes on to say that, and you can look at this interesting, and I want you to think about this and maybe give me a feedback, right, about how our classes are going on. Look at this. Certainly, the student is justified in asking his teacher the very question which Mephistopheles put to Faust. Is it right, I ask, is it even prudence to bore thyself and bore the students? So you can drop in a note in your, drop a comment in your video recording, as in telling me whether am I really boring you in the classes, okay? But yeah, then he goes on to describe how in the past history, mathematics, people started accepting mathematics, and people started pursuing mathematics in full go. So he started with the Greeks, who created the modern concept of mathematics, okay, and who spoke unequivocally for its importance. And he also goes on to say that even in the Middle Ages and during the period of Renaissance, okay, mathematics was never challenged as one of the most important studies. And as you can see, even in perusing 18th century literature, one is struck by the fact that journals which are on the level of our Harper's and the Atlantic Monthly, I don't know if these Harper's and Atlantic Monthly, I think Atlantic Monthly is still in existence, but I'm not sure about the Harper's. So they contained, in addition, alongside popular articles, right, pop culture articles, they also contained mathematical articles side by side with literary articles, okay. So the educated man and women of the 18th century knew the mathematics of their day, okay, and they kept in touch with all important scientific developments, okay. So they were as much at home with Newton's mathematics and physics as with Pope's poetry. So coming to present day, okay, this book, I think it was written way back in 1960s or 70s maybe. I think it's 60s. But look at it, the contemporary importance of learning mathematics. Think about that. So he has already mentioned that the vastly increased importance of mathematics in our time makes it all the more imperative that the modern person know something of the nature and role of mathematics. And here is my answer for people who keep asking me where do I see this, where do I see the role of functions, for example, in everyday life? Where am I going to apply? Okay, so he has acknowledged that it is true that the role of mathematics in our civilization is not always obvious, and the deeper and more complex modern applications are not readily comprehended even by specialists. Okay, so as far as possible, I'm trying to give examples from my experience, okay, from my research work, where you can potentially see applications of mathematics. I think if I remember it right, when I started with functions, I gave a glimpse of the topic which I worked on in my research work, and how the knowledge of functions, helped me in tackling that problem. Okay, it's a contemporary problem, right? So yeah, so as you can take this statement for granted, it is true that the role of mathematics in our civilization is not always obvious, and the deeper and more complex modern applications are not readily comprehended even by specialists. Okay, so that's my answer for people who keep asking me questions of where am I going to apply. Okay, but the essential nature and accomplishments of the subject can still be understood. Okay, now look at this very, very important few lines which I want you all to contemplate and maybe leave a comment on one of the aspects, right? The subject has many facets, or some might say is hydra-headed. Okay, one can look at, one can look at mathematics as a language, as a particular kind of logical structure, as a body of knowledge about number and space, as a series of methods for deriving conclusions, as the essence of our knowledge of the physical world, or merely as an amusing intellectual activity. Right? So look at these each facet carefully and comment on probably one or two of them in your video. So is mathematics a language? Okay, can it be seen as a particular kind of logical structure, or is it just a body of knowledge about number and space, or is it can it be seen as a series of methods for deriving conclusions? Okay, as the essence of or can it be seen as the essence of our knowledge of the physical world, or is it merely an amusing intellectual activity? Okay, pick 2 or 3 of these facets and please do leave a comment. Okay, so then he goes on to define define what mathematics is. He first tries to define mathematics as what mathematicians do. Okay, but mathematicians are human beings, and most of the things they do are uninteresting and some embarrassing to relate. That's a very interesting line, right? Do you feel that most of the things that mathematicians do are really uninteresting or even embarrassing to relate? Okay, so as he goes on to define that the only merit in this proposed definition of mathematics is that it points up the fact that mathematics is a human creation. Okay, so it points up the fact that mathematics is a human creation. So what do you think? Is mathematics really a human creation, or does it already exist in the nature? And then he goes on to give another variation for the definition. Mathematics is what mathematics does. What do you think he means by this? What do you think Maurice Klein means by mathematics is what mathematics does? So he says that if we examine mathematics from the standpoint of what it is intended to and does accomplish, we shall undoubtedly gain a truer and clearer picture of the subject. Okay, next. This is a very, very important sentence again. Mathematics is concerned primarily with what can be accomplished by reasoning. Think about this. Look at what he goes on to say. Why should one reason? Okay, why should one reason? It is not a natural activity for the human animal, because we are animals. Okay, it is not a natural activity for animals to reason. Okay, it is clear that one does not need reasoning to learn how to eat or to discover what foods maintain life. Okay, man knew how to feed, clothe, and house himself millenniums before mathematics existed. Getting along with the opposite sex is an art rather than a science mastered by reasoning. One can engage in a multitude of occupations and even climb high in the business and industrial world without much use of reasoning, and certainly without mathematics. One's social position is hardly elevated by a display of his knowledge of trigonometry. In fact, civilizations in which reasoning and mathematics played no role have endured and even flourished. If one were willing to reason, he could readily supply evidence to prove that reasoning is a dispensable activity. Look at the last sentence carefully. If one were willing to reason, he could readily supply evidence to prove that reasoning is a dispensable activity. Those who are opposed to reasoning will readily point out other methods of obtaining knowledge. I think you would have already studied, or you would have already been aware of the ways of obtaining knowledge through your TOK course, right? I'm not sure whether you have already gone through that. But most people, look at this, most people are in fact convinced that their senses are really more than adequate. The very common assertion, seeing is believing, expresses the common reliance upon the senses. But everyone should recognize that the senses are limited and often fallible, and even where accurate must be interpreted. So what do you think? What do you think? What the knowledge you get by through your senses, just by seeing, just by hearing, is that sufficient to, gain knowledge? So he goes on to give an example. How big is the sun? If you see, look at the sun, it's just the size of a rubber ball, right? So this is what we should believe. Then we do not see the air around us, nor can we feel, touch, smell, or taste it, but still we believe in the existence of air. Right? If you can't feel, touch, smell, or taste air, you should not believe in its existence, right? So why do you believe? Okay. Then he gives an example of a fountain pen. Okay. If you give it to someone from a primitive society, he doesn't know what to do with it. He just sees it as a shiny stick. But to an educated person, he knows the power of a fountain pen. Okay, because through his education, through his experience, he knows what a fountain pen can do. Similarly, if you look at a tall building from a distance, it is experience which tells us that the building is tall. Hence the old saying that we are prone to see what lies behind our eyes rather than what appears before them. Then he goes on to give an example of this deviation of sun's rays by the Earth's atmosphere, and says that senses in most cases, they kind of deceive us rather than providing us real knowledge. Okay, the senses are obviously helpless in obtaining some kinds of knowledge, such as distance to the sun, size of the earth, the speed of a bullet, okay, the temperature of the sun, the prediction of eclipses, and dozens of other facts. See, this was written way back in 1960s. think of contemporary problems as well. Okay, if the senses are inadequate, okay, so if senses are inadequate, yes, we have to accept that. What about experimentation, or in simple cases even measurement? Okay, so again, measurement and experimentation, they are again ways of gaining knowledge, right? So can you give me an example of simple measurement task? Suppose, I don't know if you have studied when you how you were introduced to the concept of area of any figure, area of any planar figure. Okay, let's suppose he says, for example, let's see, suppose one wants to find a very simple quantity, the area of a rectangle. To obtain it by measurement, one could lay off unit squares to cover the area and then count the number of squares. I don't know, I think you should have probably been introduced to the concept of area by counting number of squares. I don't know how many of you have gone through that kind of education, but I don't know. This is how ideally area is introduced typically to a 6th grade or 7th grade student. But we know that it is a lot more simpler to measure the lengths of the sides and then use a formula obtained by reasoning. How do you get the formula? How do you get the formula? Formula was obtained by reasoning. Okay, we reasoned out that rectangle, the area of a rectangle is the product of length and width, not by just measurements. So in the only slightly more complicated problem of determining how high a projectile will go, we should certainly not consider traveling with the projectile, right? You can't travel along with the projectile to see how high it goes. So again, measurements are not the only way, is what Morris claims. Next he moves on to experimentation. He takes an example of building a bridge across a river. You can experiment, but you know, if you just go on experimenting with your own notions of what a bridge is, what shape it should take, how long and how thick it should be, if you arbitrarily choose the lengths and thicknesses of beams and cables, right? He says that in this event it would only be fair that experimenter be the first to cross the bridge, right? So thus he says that, this is a very important sentence once again, the senses, the measurement and experimentation, okay, to consider 3 alternative ways of acquiring knowledge are by no means adequate in a variety of situations. Reasoning is essential. So what do you think about reasoning? What do you think about reasoning as a way of obtaining knowledge? He says the lawyer, the doctor, the scientist and the engineer employ reasoning daily to derive knowledge that would otherwise not be obtainable, or perhaps obtainable only at great expense and effort. Mathematics, more than any other human endeavor, relies upon reasoning to produce knowledge. Do you agree with this statement? Mathematics, more than any other human endeavor, relies upon reasoning to produce knowledge. So, but he goes on to say, but what does mathematics seek to accomplish with reasoning? Okay, he first started with reasoning is not a natural human activity for any human animal, and then we now have come this far to say that reasoning reasoning is a kind of a best way to gain knowledge. And he goes on to say that mathematics, more than any other human endeavor, relies upon reasoning to produce knowledge. But what do we seek? What do we accomplish by this reasoning? He goes on to say The primary objective of all mathematical work is to help man study nature. Studying nature is the primary objective. And in this endeavor, mathematics cooperates with science. Okay? Mathematics cooperates with science. It is obvious, right? Physics will not exist without mathematics. It doesn't mean that again, physics or even chemistry or biology, whatever it is, they don't exist without their cooperation with mathematics. Now again another interesting question comes up. Now it may seem that mathematics is merely a useful tool and that the real pursuit is science. What do you think? Is mathematics merely a tool? Is the real pursuit science? So he says he won't attempt to answer this at this stage to separate the roles of mathematics and science and to evaluate the relative merits of their contributions. Each has their own importance. Okay? So it's like more of coexistence, right? Coexistence of science and math. One lends help to the other and vice versa. So we shall simply state that their methods are different and that mathematics is at least an equal partner with science. Okay, so mathematics then discloses by reasoning secrets which nature may never have intended to reveal. The determination of the pattern of motion of celestial bodies, okay, the discovery and control of radio waves, the understanding of molecular, atomic and nuclear structures, and the creation of artificial satellites are a few basically mathematical achievements. Though you may think of pigeonholing them to this is chemistry or this is physics, or I don't know, but they are basically mathematical achievements. Okay, mathematical formulation of physical data and mathematical methods of deriving new conclusions are today the substratum in all investigations of nature. The fact that mathematics is of central importance in the study of nature reveals almost immediately several values of the subject. The first is a practical value. The construction of bridges and skyscrapers, the harnessing of power of water, coal, electricity and the atom, the effective employment of light, sound and radio in illumination, communication, navigation and even entertainment, and the advantageous employment of chemical knowledge in the design of materials, in the production of useful forms of oil and in medicine are but a few of the practical achievements already attained. Again, I would like to point out this book was written way back in 1960s or 70s, and now we are in 2021. Can you add few more examples of the practical value of mathematics? Can you research out what are the contemporary problems that have been addressed by mathematics? However, material progress is not the most compelling reason for the study of nature, nor have practical results usually come about from investigations so directed. In fact, to overemphasize practical values is to lose sight of the greatest significance of human thought. This is my second answer to people who keep asking me, where do I use this? What is the point of studying functions? What is the point of studying binomial theorem? Okay? To overemphasize practical values is to lose sight of the greater significance of human thought. The deeper reason for the study of nature is to try to understand the ways of nature, that is to satisfy sheer intellectual curiosity. So mathematics can be pursued just for satisfaction of intellectual curiosity. Indeed, to ask disinterested questions about nature is one of the distinguishing marks of mankind. Okay? See, all civilizations, some people would have at least thought about these questions, right? How did universe come about? How old is the universe? How old is the earth? How large are sun and earth? Is man an accident or a part of a larger design? Will the solar system continue to function, or will the earth someday fall into the sun? What is light? What is sound? Okay? Of course, not all people are interested in such questions. Food, shelter, sex and television are enough to keep many happy. But others, aware of the pervasive natural mysteries, are more strongly obsessed to resolve them than any businessman is to acquire wealth and power. So where do you think you fit in? Do you belong to those people who seek intellectual curiosity, or are you one among the people who feel that food, shelter, sex and television are enough to keep many happy? Right? Beyond improvement in the material life of man and beyond satisfaction of intellectual curiosity, the study of nature offers intangible values of another sort, especially the abolition of fear and terror and their replacement by a deep, quiet satisfaction in the ways of nature. So this part, I think it's little, I would say, not relevant to us, because not many are deeply religious these days, and not many believe in all superstitions, so we have come very far. So this part of the text you can read, you can get a glimpse of the nature of humans, how people thought about what they feared about, okay, probably 30-40 years before. Now we have come very far, so I think we don't have to talk anything about these fears, okay, superstition and all those. So, but anyway, this quote sums up the past few 2 or 3 pages. Those seemingly unprofitable amusements of speculative brains have freed us from serfdom, given us undreamed of powers, and in fact have replaced negative doctrines by positive mathematical laws which reveal a remarkable order and uniformity in nature. Man has emerged as a proud possessor of knowledge which has enabled him to view nature calmly and objectively. So, if you remember, an eclipse, people thought that eclipse is a sign of, they had a negative connotation altogether in people's minds. So an eclipse of the sun occurring on schedule is no longer an occasion for trembling, okay, but for quiet satisfaction that we know nature's ways. We breathe freely, knowing that nature will not be willful or capricious. Yeah. Indeed, man has been remarkably successful in the study of nature. History is said to repeat itself, but in general, the circumstances of the supposed repetition are not the same as those of the earlier occurrence. As a consequence, the history of man has not been too effective a guide for the future. Nature is kinder. When nature repeats herself, and she does so constantly, the repetitions are exact facsimils of previous events, and therefore man can anticipate nature's behavior and be prepared for what will take. This is a very interesting sentence. We have learned to recognize the patterns of nature, and we can speak today of the uniformity of nature and delight in the regularity of a behavior. Gone are those days when people feared eclipses. They didn't know when exactly eclipses happened. So now it was all uncertain before. Okay, because we didn't have much knowledge. Now we have come this far. Now the nature becomes more uniform. Okay, and we delight in the regularity of nature's behavior. The successes of mathematics in the study of inanimate nature. So far we talked about inanimate nature. But what about the study of human nature itself? Again, this was written way back in 1960s. Then itself, he has talked about the applications of mathematics in human nature, such as banking, insurance, pension systems, and whatnot, economics, politics, sociology. Okay, number, quantitative studies, and precise reasoning have replaced vague, subjective, and ineffectual speculations and have already given evidence of greater values to come. As man turns to thoughts about himself and his fellow man, other questions occur to him which are as fundamental as any he can ask. Why is man born? What purposes does he serve or should he serve? What future awaits him? The knowledge acquired about a physical universe has profound implications for the origin and role of man. Moreover, as mathematics and science have amassed increasing knowledge and power, they have gradually encompassed the biological and psychological sciences. Okay, now it's a norm. By people working on biology, even psychology, they also use mathematics. But it was a new thing way back in 1960s. Thus, it has come about that mathematics and science have profoundly affected even philosophy and religion. Perhaps the most profound questions in the realm of philosophy are: what is truth and how does man acquire it? Though we have no final answer to these questions, the contribution of mathematics towards this end is paramount. Period. Okay? Mathematics seeks to find the truth. So look at this. Though some startling developments in the 19th century altered completely our understanding of the nature of mathematics, okay, though keeps changing, okay, even physics evolves, some theory will be disproved, okay, a new theory emerges, okay, but ultimately we are all leading towards finding out the truth, right? So that is the effectiveness of the subject, especially in representing and analyzing natural phenomena, has still kept mathematics the focal point of all investigations into the nature of knowledge. Okay? And mathematics doesn't stop there. It also offers services to the arts. Most people are inclined to believe that arts are independent of mathematics, but in this book we will see that mathematics has fashioned major styles of painting and architecture, and the service mathematics renders to music, okay, music has not only enabled man to understand it, but has spread its enjoyment to all corners of our globe. Practical, scientific, philosophical, and artistic problems have caused men to investigate mathematics. But there is one other motive which is as strong as any of these: the search for beauty. Okay. On one end we are seeking truth, and at the same time we are also searching for beauty. So in that sense, mathematics itself can be seen as an art, and as such offers the pleasures which all the arts afford. He says, this last statement may come as a shock to people who are used to the conventional concept of the true arts and mentally contrasts these with mathematics to the detriment of the latter. But the average person has not thought through what the arts really are and what they offer. All that many people actually see in painting, for example, are familiar scenes and perhaps bright colors. These qualities, however, are not the only are not the ones which make painting an art. The real values must be learned, and a genuine appreciation of art calls for much study. So again, nevertheless, we shall not insist on the aesthetic values of mathematics. It may be fairer to rest on the position that just as there are tone deaf and color blind people, so may there be some who temperamentally are intolerant of cold argumentation and the seemingly over-fine distinction of mathematics. So again, where do you fall? Are you the person who seeks intellectual curiosity, who seeks beauty, who seeks truth, or are you just an animal who just exists for food, shelter, and pleasures, all pleasures? Okay, and then he goes on to talk about how it offers intellectual challenges through puzzles. Okay, puzzles we all know, and its history goes back to Greek and Roman times. Okay. Okay, this is the main stuff which I wanted you to read through. Okay, so please feel free to read at your own pace. Okay, and please do leave comments. I'll post all the prompts on a doc, on a Google Doc. Okay, so you can respond to those prompts in your videos. Okay, guys, have a nice weekend and hope that you all would have read this by Monday. Thank you. Have a nice weekend. See you. Bye bye.